Okay, let's unpack this. There is a term, a concept really, in military circles that sounds like a physical place you could find on a map.
Yeah, it sounds like a line drawn in the sand.
Exactly. But it's not geographical at all. It's psychological. And the terrifying thing is that once a country crosses it, it's almost impossible to go back. It's called the Mogadishu line.
It's a really chilling concept. It basically defines that precise moment, the point where a humanitarian mission,
Yeah.
handing out food, guarding aid convoys, doing good, just sort of imperceptibly shifts into active combat.
It's the moment helping becomes hunting.
That's a perfect way to put it.
And today we are doing a deep dive into the very event that gave that line its name. We're talking about the Battle of Mogadishu, October 3rd and 4th, 1993. Most people, of course, know it by the book and the movie title, Black Hawk Down.
And it really is the definition of a modern military tragedy. And frankly, it's a masterclass in how quickly and how catastrophically things can go wrong.
But we're not just going to retell the movie here. We've got a whole stack of documents that I think paint a much more complicated and a much grittier picture.
Yeah, we're looking at the official Task Force Ranger after-action reports. We've got tactical analysis from the Asymmetric Warfare Group, Mark Bowden's book, of course, which is the definitive account.
And crucially, we've also got some local Somali perspectives that we've gathered from online archives, which give us the view from inside the city from the street.
And that's so important to have.
So the mission for this deep dive is to try and answer one question. How did a mission that started with the best intentions, I mean, literally stopping a famine spiral into the most intense, ferocious, close-quarters battle the U.S. military had seen since Vietnam?
To get that, you can't just start with the first shot fired on October 3rd. You have to rewind.
The context is everything here. So 1993, why was the U.S. military even in the Horn of Africa to begin with?
Well, you have to understand the scale of the humanitarian disaster. Early 93, Somalia wasn't just unstable, it was apocalyptic. The central government had completely collapsed a couple of years earlier, which triggered this brutal civil war between clan warlords.
And then a drought hit on top of that.
A catastrophic drought. So you have war and famine on a biblical scale. We're talking hundreds of thousands of people starving to death.
And I think a lot of people forget that initially the intervention was a huge success story. The world saw these just harrowing images on the news. Skeletal children, mass starvation, and the UN stepped in.
Right, and the U.S. led a coalition, UNITAF, specifically to secure the food routes. And it worked. I mean, by and large, the famine was halted. People were being fed.
That was the feeding phase. That was the clear, unambiguous humanitarian goal.
Exactly. But then comes the moment you cross that Mogadishu line. In May of 93, the mission transitions. It becomes UNOSOM TISIT.
And the mandate changes.
The mandate changes completely. It goes from just guard the food to nation building. The UN decides it needs to disarm the warlords and try to restore a functioning government.
And that is the absolute textbook definition of mission creep. You go from protecting food trucks to telling these heavily armed factions, okay, now hand over your guns.
It's a massive escalation. And the biggest, the most powerful obstacle to that new mandate was a warlord named Mohamed Farrah Aidid.
He was the main guy in Mogadishu.
He was the power broker. He controlled the capital, he ran his own radio station for propaganda, and most importantly, he controlled the food distribution in his sectors of the city.
So to him, food was power.
Absolutely. If he decides who eats and who doesn't, he controls the population. It's that simple.
So the UN tries to sideline him, to marginalize him from this new political process, and he pushes back hard. And this is the real turning point, June 5th, 1993.
A day that changed absolutely everything. Aidid's militia ambushes a convoy of Pakistani peacekeepers. They were on a mission to inspect a weapons storage site that was supposed to be under UN control.
And this wasn't just a skirmish.
No, it was a slaughter. They systematically ambushed and killed them. 24 UN soldiers died.
24? That's a massacre.
It is. And the international community's response was, immediate and furious. The UN Security Council passes Resolution 837. And what this does is it essentially puts a price on Aidid's head. He is declared an outlaw.
And just like that, the mission shifts again. It's not peacekeeping anymore. It's not nation building. It's a manhunt.
It's a manhunt. And that's when President Clinton authorizes the deployment of this new elite unit, Task Force Ranger. Operation Gothic Serpent is officially a go.
Now, we should probably clarify what Task Force Ranger actually was, because the name itself is a little misleading. It suggests it was just Army Rangers.
Yeah, that's a good point. Looking at the order of battle, this wasn't a single unit. It was a composite all-star team. I mean, this was the absolute tip of the American military spear.
Okay, so let's break down the roster. Who are the key players in this force?
You basically had three distinct elements designed to work in perfect concert. First, you have C Squadron from the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta Force.
The operators operate.
The best of the best.
Yeah.
Their job is the smash. They're the ones kicking in the doors, grabbing the high-value targets. You can think of them as the scalpel.
Okay, the scalpel. Then you've got Bravo Company, 3rd Ranger Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment.
The Rangers. They are the hammer. These are elite light infantry. Their specific job on these missions was to fast rope in from the helicopters, secure the four corners of the block around the target building, and create a security perimeter. Basically, make sure no one gets in or out while Delta is inside doing their work.
And finally, you have their ride, the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the SOAR.
The Night Stalkers.
Huh?
Flying the MH-60 Blackhawks and those tiny but terrifying AH-6 Little Birds. These pilots are, without exaggeration, considered the best helicopter pilots on the entire planet.
So you've got the best special operators, the best infantry, the best pilots, you have the best technology, night vision, satellite intel. On paper, this looks like a complete mismatch against a militia with, rusty AK-47s and pickup trucks.
It does. But reading the analysis from the asymmetric warfare group, that very technological advantage actually created a kind of a blind spot.
How so?
The report highlights a critical failure to appreciate the asymmetric nature of the fight. The U.S. had all the high-tech gear, yes, but Aidid's militia had the terrain. They knew every alley, every rooftop, every single bolt hole in that city.
And they had numbers.
And they had sheer numbers. We're talking about a militia that could mobilize thousands of people, not just fighters, but civilians, spotters, everyone, in a matter of minutes.
That ability to mobilize is terrifying. Okay, let's move to the day itself. Section 1, the trap. We're setting the stage for October 3rd, 1993. The target this time wasn't actually Aidid himself, was it?
No, it wasn't. The intelligence, which was a mix of CIA assets on the ground and local informants, had pinpointed a meeting of some of Aidid's top lieutenants.
Who were they?
Two men in particular, Omar Salad Elmi, who was essentially Aidid's chief political advisor, and Mohammed Hassan Awala, his interior minister. These were the brains of the operation.
So very high-value targets, you snatch them, you effectively cripple Aidid's entire political structure, but the location, that was the real problem.
That was the problem. The meeting was happening in a house near the Olympic Hotel. And this is crucial. It's located in what the Americans called the Black Sea neighborhood.
This is deep in Aidid's territory.
It's the heart of his stronghold. It's a dense, sprawling maze of narrow streets, open-air markets, tin-roof shacks, and it's extremely hostile territory. Going in there in broad daylight is the tactical equivalent of kicking a hornet's nest.
The plan was for another standard snatch and grab, in and out, they hoped, in less than an hour. But there's a detail in the AARs about something called pattern setting that just jumps right out. The task force had already run 6 successful missions before this one.
But that's key. There were successful raids. They'd captured other targets, like a key financier named Osman Addo. But in doing so, they'd created a predictable pattern.
How?
Well, the asymmetric warfare report notes that to, quote, desensitize the population, the task force would fly their helicopters over the city multiple times a day, every day.
The idea being if you see them all the time, they just become background noise.
Right. Oh, there go the Americans again, just flying around.
Yeah.
The theory was the Somalis would get so used to seeing Blackhawks that they wouldn't react when the real raid finally happened.
But it had the exact opposite effect.
It had the complete opposite effect.
Yeah.
The Somalis were smart. They weren't desensitized. They were educated. They watched. They learned. They realized that when the helicopters hovered in a very specific formation, or when they saw the ground convoy of Humvees begin to stage at the airport, a raid was imminent.
So they were using the American patterns to predict their moves.
Exactly. And they used what the report calls civilian patterns of life. Kids playing soccer in a certain street, women moving through the market in a certain way to mask their own surveillance and weapon movements.
Mm-hmm.
By October 3rd, they weren't surprised. They were ready.
They were studying the playbook.
They were. And they knew that while they couldn't beat the Americans in the sky, eventually the soldiers had to come down to the street. And the street was their turf.
Which sets up this feeling of, I guess, overconfidence on the American side.
A bit, yeah. 6 successful missions. They'd done this before. There was a sense of, we've got this down, we'll be in and out before they even know what hit them. A false sense of security had definitely set in.
Okay, so let's go to the launch. It's mid-afternoon, broad daylight.
Which was a major risk. These units are built to own the night. Their night vision technology gives them a massive, almost unfair advantage.
But the intel was hot.
The intel said the meeting was happening now. You go now or you miss them. So they launched 19 aircraft, 12 vehicles on the ground, and about 160 men.
Okay, Section 2, the snatch. The actual infiltration, at first, goes almost perfectly to plan.
It's a thing to behold. It's a violent synchronized ballet. The little birds, the small helicopters, come in low and fast and drop Delta operators right onto the roof of the target building.
And the Blackhawks with the Rangers.
They come in right behind them, hovering maybe 60, 70 feet over the street, and the Rangers start sliding down these thick, fast ropes to set the perimeter.
But almost immediately there's a problem, the first sign of friction.
Yes. A young Ranger, Private Todd Blackburn, either misses the rope or loses his grip. He slips, and he falls the entire way to the street below.
From 70 feet, that's like falling from a 7-story building.
It's a catastrophic fall, massive internal injuries, head trauma. He was critically wounded. And this moment is so vital because it immediately begins to fragment the plan. Well, you can't just leave him there. A medic rushes to him. They have to stabilize him. And then they have to detach 3 Humvees from the main ground convoy, a convoy that's already under fire, to form a separate little column just to evacuate this one casualty back to base.
So before the main battle has even really started, the ground force is already smaller than it was supposed to be.
Exactly. It's the first domino to fall. But at the same time, inside the target building, Delta is having total success.
They got their guys.
They got them. They storm the building, and within minutes, they have 24 prisoners, including the 2 high-value targets, zip-tied and ready for extraction.
So on paper, the snatch is a success. The primary mission objective is met.
It's accomplished. If they could have just loaded everyone onto the convoy and driven away right then and there, we would not be having this conversation today.
But this is where the trap we talked about snaps shut.
Instantly. The reaction from the neighborhood wasn't slow. It was immediate.
And we see this in the Somali accounts we looked at, burning tires.
Burning tires. It was a low-tech but incredibly effective signal. As soon as those helicopters came in, tires were lit on street corners all across that part of the city. The thick black smoke billowing into the sky was the call to arms. It meant, come to the Black Sea. The fight is here.
And they came.
They came in waves. Thousands of them. Armed militia, civilians with guns, everyone. And the nature of the fire coming up with the helicopters changed dramatically. It wasn't just the pop-pop of AK-47s anymore.
RPGs.
The pilots started seeing rocket-propelled grenades, RPGs, streaking up past their cockpits. Dozens of them.
Now, we should probably clarify for people. An RPG is basically an unguided anti-tank weapon. It is absolutely not designed to hit a moving helicopter. It's like trying to hit a moving car with a football.
That's true, but if you throw enough footballs, one of them is going to hit. The Somali militia, reportedly with some outside help, had figured out how to use them effectively. They'd just fire them in volleys, creating these curtains of flak in the sky, hoping for a lucky hit.
And that brings us to Section 3, the snap. The single moment, the entire mission profile just completely disintegrates.
It's at approximately 4:03 p.m. A Black Hawk with the call sign Super 61, piloted by Chief Warrant Officer Cliff Wolcott, is in a low, circular orbit, providing covering fire for the troops on the ground.
And a lucky hit happens.
Lucky hit happens, an RPG connects with its tail rotor assembly.
And for anyone who doesn't know helicopter mechanics, the tail rotor is what counteracts the torque of the main blades. It stops the helicopter from just spinning itself apart. You lose that, you lose control.
You lose everything. The aircraft immediately begins to spin violently, uncontrollably, and it slams into a narrow alleyway about 5 blocks northeast of the target building.
This changes the entire psychology of the battle, doesn't it? That Black Hawk helicopter was the symbol of American power, of invincibility. It was a monster in the sky.
Into the Death Star.
Yeah.
And seeing it on the ground, broken and smoking, for the Somali militia, it was this massive boost in morale. It showed the Americans could bleed.
And for the task force.
It was a shock. But more than that, operationally, this is the snap. The mission instantly, in that second, changes from what was essentially a police action.
Get the bad guys.
Right. To a full-blown CR mission, combat search and rescue. The Ranger Creed is absolute on this. I will never leave a fallen comrade to fall into the hands of the enemy.
So the guys on the ground, the Rangers and Delta operators who had just secured the prisoners, they can't leave now.
They can't. Their new mission is to fight their way to that crash site and secure the crew.
And the ground convoy, the one led by Lieutenant Colonel Danny McKnight that was supposed to pick them up.
Their mission changes too. Now they have to forget the original pickup point and try to run a gauntlet through the city, through a hornet's nest of roadblocks and ambushes to get to the wreckage of Super 6-1.
And the descriptions of that convoy's movement are just harrowing. They're in Humvees, many of which aren't even fully armored. They have canvas doors, and they're taking fire from rooftops, from windows, from alleyways.
It was a 360-degree ambush from the second they left the main road. They were taking casualties constantly, and they kept getting lost. The satellite maps they had were good, but they couldn't show the makeshift barricades, cars, rocks, burning tires that the Somalis were throwing up in real time.
And then, just as they're trying to deal with the chaos of the first crash, the absolute unthinkable happens.
Yeah, as if the situation wasn't desperate enough.
A second Black Hawk goes down.
Super 6-4, piloted by Mike Durant. It's also providing fire support. It takes an RPG hit in the tail, and it crashes about 20 minutes after the first one. But it's about a mile away from the main fight.
So now the commander, General Garrison, who's watching this unfold from a command center back at the airport, is looking at an absolute nightmare scenario.
It's the worst-case scenario multiplied by 2. He has one force of about 99 men pinned down, trying to fight their way to the first crash site. He has a ground convoy that's getting absolutely chewed to pieces trying to reach them.
And now he has a second helicopter crew down, totally isolated, with a massive hostile mob closing in on their position fast.
And he has no more reserves. Every Ranger is committed. The quick reaction force he has on standby is already struggling to get organized. He has nothing left to send.
And this sets the stage for what is, I think you have to say, the most heroic and simultaneously tragic sequence of the entire battle. Section 4, the siege. And we have to talk about Gary Gordon and Randy Schuhart.
Yeah. Master Sergeant Gary Gordon and Sergeant First Class Randy Schuhart. They were Delta Force snipers. They were in another Black Hawk, Super 6-2, that was orbiting high above.
So they have a bird's eye view of everything.
They do. And they're looking straight down at Mike Durant's crash site, Super 6-4. They can see the crew is alive, but they're injured and trapped in the wreckage. And they can see the mob. Hundreds of armed Somalis are converging on that crash from all directions.
And they know there are no friendly ground forces anywhere near there. No one is coming to help them in time.
Not in time, no. So they get on the radio to the command helicopter, and they make a request.
They ask to be put on the ground.
They ask for permission to insert, to go down there on foot, just the two of them, to defend the crew. And command says no.
Too dangerous.
It's a suicide mission. 2 men against a mob of hundreds. The math is impossible. Permission denied.
But they asked again.
They ask a second time, more insistently. Again, they're denied. It's too risky. But they persist. They know what's going to happen to that crew if no one gets down there, so they ask a third time.
And what changes?
I think the commander realizes there is literally no other option. It's this, or the crew is dead or captured.
Right.
And so finally, permission is granted.
Let's just pause on the mindset there for a second. The courage that takes, they knew exactly what they were roping into.
Oh, there's absolutely no doubt. They knew they weren't likely coming back from that.
So the helicopter makes a low pass. They drop in.
They drop in, armed with just their personal weapons. They pull Mike Durant and the other surviving crew members from the smoking wreckage, and they establish a tiny defensive perimeter around the nose of the aircraft.
Are they to fight?
They fight off wave after wave of the militia. They're protecting men they barely knew simply because they were fellow soldiers in need. They held them off for an incredible amount of time.
But eventually, they were just overrun.
The numbers were too great. They were both killed. The other crew members were killed as well, except for Durant. He was badly injured and taken prisoner. But their action almost certainly saved his life from the initial violence of the mob.
And for that action, they were both posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor.
The first recipients since the Vietnam War. An unbelievable act of sacrifice.
Meanwhile, back at the first crash site, the main body of Rangers and Delta is now completely trapped as night falls.
Right. This is the lost platoon scenario that soldiers dread. They've made it to the crash site of Super 6-1, but now they're surrounded. They're holding a few buildings in a tight cluster, taking fire from every direction.
And this is where those urban warfare lessons from the reports really come into focus. The Somalis weren't fighting like a conventional army.
Not at all. They were using what the analysts call swarming tactics. They didn't have sophisticated radios to coordinate, but they didn't need them. They just moved towards the sound of the guns flowing through the alleyways like water.
And the report also mentions the incredible difficulty with the rules of engagement.
Oh, it was a nightmare. The militia fighters were intentionally mixing in with civilians. They were using human shields. Women and children were in the streets, sometimes actively pointing out American positions to the gunmen hiding in doorways.
It creates this horrible moral dilemma for the soldiers.
It's an impossible choice. You're in the dark, you're taking fire, and you see a figure move. Is it a fighter? Is it a child? If you hesitate, you die. If you shoot, you might kill an innocent. In the sheer chaos of that night, those distinctions they blurred into a fight for survival.
And the only thing really that was keeping those 99 Americans from being completely overrun was the air support, the little birds.
The AH-6s, those pilots. What they did that night was just legendary. They were flying these incredibly dangerous strafing runs, sometimes just feet above the rooftops. They were doing what are called danger close fire missions.
What does that mean exactly?
It means they are firing their weapons, their miniguns, and their rockets within just meters of friendly troops. The margin for error is 0. One twitch, and you kill your own guys.
Yeah.
But they had to do it to push back the waves of Somali fighters.
And the sheer volume of fire is just staggering. The sources say the helicopters expended something like 80,000 rounds of ammunition over the course of the night.
It was a literal wall of lead. The pilots were flying until they were out of fuel and ammo, landing at the airport, rearming, refueling in minutes, and taking off to go right back into the fight.
Yeah.
Without them, it's almost certain that the men at the first crash site would not have survived the night. They were running out of ammo, they had no water, and the enemy was closing in from everywhere.
Which brings us into the final hours of the battle, Section 5, the longest night. And this is where there's a really common misconception, probably because of how the movie has to condense the timeline. The idea that the Americans just kind of fought their way out on their own at dawn.
Yeah, that is a huge misconception. The reality is they were completely stuck. They were pinned down. They could not break out. They needed heavy armor to smash through the roadblocks and barricades, and the task force didn't have any.
And this brings us back to a key political failure, doesn't it? Why didn't they have tanks or armored vehicles?
It was a specific decision made months earlier, back in Washington. The military commanders on the ground had requested armored support. They wanted Bradley fighting vehicles and even M1 Abrams tanks.
But the request was denied.
It was denied by the Secretary of Defense at the time, Les Aspin. And the logic was purely about optics. They didn't want the peacekeeping mission to appear too aggressive, too warlike. They wanted what they called a light footprint.
That phrase, light footprint, it sounds good in a press briefing, but what it meant on the ground was that U.S. Rangers were driving into a full-scale urban ambush in Humvees with fiberglass doors.
Precisely. It was a fatal miscalculation of the risk. So to get those men out, the U.S. had to essentially go beg for help from the UN coalition partners that they had, frankly, somewhat alienated.
So a rescue convoy is put together?
A massive rescue convoy is assembled at the UN base at the airport. And it's crucial to understand this wasn't just an American force. It included elements of the U.S. 10th Mountain Division, yes, but they were riding in Malaysian Condor armored personnel carriers. And the entire column was led by Pakistani tanks.
The irony there is just incredible. The Pakistanis, whose own men had been massacred by Aidid's militia just a few months earlier, were now the ones leading the charge back into the fire to save the Americans.
It was a truly international effort. The convoy was miles long. It took them hours to fight their way into the city center. The Somali resistance was just that stiff. But eventually, with that heavy armor, they broke through to the crash site in the dark, early hours of October 4th.
And then comes the extraction. And the story of the infamous Mogadishu Mile.
Right, and this is another point where we really need to separate the Hollywood version from the historical reality.
In the movie, it's this very cinematic sequence. The vehicles are all full, so the soldiers have to run on their own all the way back to the safety of the stadium.
Yeah, this desperate, lonely sprint through the city. The reality was much grittier, much more chaotic. The armored vehicles, the APCs and the Humvees were absolutely crammed full of the wounded and the dead.
So there was no room.
There was no room for the able-bodied soldiers. So the healthy ones, and I use that term loosely, because everyone was exhausted, dehydrated, bleeding, or in shock, they had to move on foot. But they weren't just running blindly to a stadium. They were conducting a fighting withdrawal. They used the vehicles as rolling cover, firing and moving, fighting a running gun battle for about a mile to a designated rally point on National Street.
So it wasn't a run, it was a fight.
It was a running fight.
Yeah.
A tactical movement under fire. But the physical toll, you have
Yeah.
to imagine. You've been fighting for 15 straight hours. You've had no water. You've been running on pure adrenaline watching your friends get shot. And now you have to run and fight your way out of the city. It was just physically and emotionally shattering.
So they finally get out, the sun comes up on October 4th, and now it's time to count the cost. Section 6, the aftermath, the butcher's bill.
It was just devastating. On the U.S. side, 18 soldiers were killed during the battle itself. A 19th soldier, Sergeant Matt Ryerson, died in a mortar attack a couple of days later. More than 80 were wounded. For the assault force that went in, that's a casualty rate of over 50%.
And what about the international coalition partners?
They're often forgotten, but they paid a price for that rescue. One Malaysian soldier was killed when his APC was hit by an RPG, and 7 more were wounded. 2 Pakistani soldiers were also wounded. It was a multinational tragedy.
And on the Somali side?
The numbers are, frankly, impossible to verify with any certainty. The estimates are just all over the place. But the generally accepted range is somewhere from 300 to over 1,000 killed, and thousands more wounded, many of them civilians caught in the crossfire.
And looking at those Reddit threads and the Somali accounts we pulled, this is the deep, lingering scar. To the U.S., this battle was a heroic rescue mission that went wrong. But for the people living in the Black Sea neighborhood,
It was a siege. It was an invasion. They describe heavy weapons from helicopters being fired into residential blocks. Those little bird gun runs that we praised for saving the Rangers. From the perspective of someone on the ground, that looks like indiscriminate slaughter from the sky.
they felt they were defending their city.
Many of them absolutely felt they were defending their homes, their neighborhood, against a foreign invader. They felt, as one account said, boxed in.
And there was also that specific claim in the local accounts about a ransom.
Yes, there's a very persistent local story that the American forces were so trapped that Aidid demanded a sum of money to allow the convoy to leave. Now, officially, and looking at the tactical reality of the tanks breaking through, there is no evidence to support that a ransom for exit was ever paid. But the very fact that this story exists, that is part of the narrative on the street, shows just how differently the two sides perceived the events of that night.
So the smoke clears. The U.S. has the 2 lieutenants they went in to capture. But Mike Durant is a prisoner of war.
Right. He was held for 11 days. And in the end, to secure his release and to try and de-escalate the situation, the U.S. eventually released the very prisoners they had captured in the raid.
So, in the end, the entire mission was a wash. Tactically, it was a complete wash.
Yes. The objectives were ultimately negated. The human cost was absolutely exorbitant. And strategically, it was a disaster.
Which leads us to the final part of this, the legacy. This event didn't just end when the troops came home. It created what's now known as the Mogadishu effect.
This is the real long-term strategic fallout. When the images of dead American soldiers being dragged through the streets of Mogadishu by cheering mobs hit CNN, the American public was absolutely horrified.
The outrage was immediate.
It was. The question everyone was asking was, why are our sons dying for Somali warlords in a city we can't even find on a map? And the political reaction was swift.
President Clinton ordered a withdrawal.
A full withdrawal. The Somalia mission was effectively over. But the long-term impacts of those images was that the U.S. became deeply, deeply risk-averse when it came to foreign interventions, especially humanitarian ones.
And we saw the direct result of that just a year later, 1994, Rwanda.
That is the ghost of Mogadishu, right there. In Rwanda, a full-blown genocide begins. 800,000 people are being hacked to death with machetes over 100 days. The U.S. had the military capacity to jam the radio stations, broadcasting the kill orders to intervene, to do something, but they did absolutely nothing.
Because they were terrified of another Black Hawk Down.
Precisely. The Mogadishu line had now become a wall that they refused to cross. The administration refused to even use the word genocide, because admitting it was genocide would have legally obligated them to act under international conventions.
And there's an even darker legacy, isn't there? One that connects directly to the war on terror.
There is. Intelligence reports later confirmed that al-Qaeda operatives had been in Somalia at the time, providing some training to the militias, specifically on how to use RPGs to shoot down helicopters. But more importantly, Osama bin Laden watched the American reaction to Mogadishu. He watched them pull out, and he drew a conclusion.
He called the American soldier a paper tiger.
He did. He came to believe that the American public had no stomach for casualties. He told his followers that if you hit the Americans hard enough, if you kill enough of their soldiers, they will pack their bags and go home. And that calculation directly influenced his planning for the embassy bombings in '98, the attack on the USS Cole, and ultimately 9/11. He thought the U.S. would fold again, just like they did in Somalia.
Wow. So the ripple effects of that single afternoon in the Black Sea neighborhood literally shaped the next 2 decades of global conflict.
It completely redefined the limits of American power in the post-Cold War era. And it taught the U.S. military some very hard, very bloody lessons, that air power isn't a magic wand, that you absolutely need heavy armor if you're going to fight in a city. And most of all, you cannot do peacekeeping on the cheap. If there's a chance you're going to have to fight, you have to go in with the full weight of your capabilities.
Which brings us all the way back to where we started, the Mogadishu line.
It's the line between good intentions and the brutal, unforgiving reality of war. In Somalia, the U.S. crossed that line without fully understanding what was waiting for them on the other side, and when they tried to step back over it, it was already too late.
It's a heavy, heavy lesson. And for our listeners, I think the real challenge is to look at an event like this not just as a movie with heroes and villains, but as this incredibly complex collision of politics, desperation, miscalculation, and technology.
Absolutely. It's about understanding the true cost of engagement and the sometimes even higher cost of disengagement.
So we'll leave you with this provocative thought to chew on. In the long run, did the creation of the Mogadishu line actually save American lives by forcing the military and politicians to be more cautious? Or did that very caution condemn hundreds of thousands of others to die in places like Rwanda, simply because we were afraid to cross that line again?
It's a question with no easy answer at all.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.